Now, what was profound about it
And
is...
you weren't in an altered state of consciousness.
Well, who knows where I was.
you weren't on, right.
Something had happened.
Uh-huh.
I came out of the meditation.
Chemically, not chemically altered.
No, not chemically altered.
Right, okay.
When I opened my eyes
Uh-huh.
from meditating, the clarity remained.
Mm-hmm.
I could see with total clarity. I didn't know what the heck had happened. This was certainly impossible based on all my classical training and my medical training. So I got in my car and I drove to my office to see what had actually occurred. What was immediately interesting is that I could see all the street signs, all the license plates, all the billboards without my glasses on.
Huh.
I got to my office, I sat in my exam chair, and I started to project all different eye charts that I'd never looked at before. And I could read all the letters on the chart, all the way down to the smallest line. And I said, wow. First of all, this is not supposed to happen. But if this did happen, I wonder what my prescription would be, because what I'd noticed for years is that my eyes worsen, the prescription got stronger.
Mm-hmm.
I'd seen that with thousands of patients as well. Maybe, since I'm seeing clearer, maybe my prescription became lessened, or maybe there's no prescription at all. So I put myself behind my phoropter, that instrument that the eye doctors use, projected a chart I'd never seen, and then started to examine myself. You know, which is better, one or two?
Right.
And of course I got just as confused as the patients did when I did it for them. What was interesting is when I finished doing the exam, thinking that I would find no prescription on the instrument, I looked, and the prescription on the instrument was exactly what I was wearing in my glasses. In other words, I was seeing 300% better with no glasses on, but the optical measurements of my eyes had not changed at all. And I had to take a look at that, and I said, wait a minute. If the optical measurements of my eyes hadn't changed, the prescription, and yet I'm seeing 300% better, then the seeing is happening from somewhere other than the eye. And that was the first time I realized that vision was occurring in a multiplicity of places. Not only in the eye and the brain, not only perhaps in the mind, but somewhere other than the mind. And so that started a whole period of experimentation, which I called an experiment on the workings of the mind. And for the next 4 years, I was in a continual state of experimenting with myself. And what I was looking at is there a button somewhere in the mind that if I can touch that button, my vision will open up? I will be able to see that change. Well, the interesting thing about that experience in 1976 is that I'm going to be 61 next month.
Huh.
It's now 2008. It's 32 years. I've never had a pair of glasses on my face since that day, and I see well at distance, and I see well up close.
This is a fantastic story, and what I'm wearing contacts now, but you wrote this book, Take Off Your Glasses and See.
Yeah.
What is it that, what this happened in your experience, but what can happen for me, for someone else? Sometimes there's someone who has these, what I would call extraordinary experiences.
Yeah.
Okay? Is it replicatable? I don't know if that's a proper word, but how can
you replicate it?
Can you replicate it? Could I replicate that experience?
For some people, yes.
Mm-hmm.
It's not because the experience I had is not valid.
Mm-hmm.
It's because, this is just my because, I don't think that everything is available to everyone.
Aha.
For instance, my mother and my father are no longer living. My mother had cancer 4 times. When she died, she didn't have cancer. Now, most people wouldn't have that experience, but my mother had that experience.
Yeah.
Now, someone else may be an incredible artist. My mother couldn't paint, and neither can I. So I don't know what the maximum potential is for each human being.
Yeah.
I think that's an individualized thing. And so all we can do is try to find whatever that place is within each of us. And my sense is that something will open But is that something going to be the same for you as for me? Probably not. But it may be something just as important.
Yeah.
It's just
yeah,
for you.
Yeah. This is something really I found very significant when we were talking the other day. And it's a real departure from what is commonly these days the secret and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
There was a statement that you made, we can only be what we are, not what we want to be. I think that's very profound, and it's a departure from that.
Right.
Expand on that, because I think that's very significant. You were giving examples about flowers and trees,
Yeah.
and you just touched on it a moment ago
Yeah.
about how everything isn't the same for everybody. I think that's a big deal.
You know, sometimes I say, do we really change? Or do we become just more accepting of who we've always been? I look at photographs of myself as a child, 4 or 5 years old. I look at myself as a young man, and I look at myself as a mature man with 2 grown-up children. Have I changed? Well, I don't have as much hair. The skin is a little bit more saggy than it used to be. Maybe I have a little bit more belly than I used to. The muscles are smaller. Certain things are more rounded in my nature. Maybe the edges that I used to have as a younger man have rounded out, sort of like a stone that falls in the river. But has my core changed? Has my nature changed? This is just my perception. Not at all. I'm the same person I've always been.
Yeah.
Just certain outside things change. It's sort of like, does a tree change?
Yeah.
Well, it gets taller, it gets more bark, maybe it loses certain leaves, but it's still an oak tree, or it's still a pine tree. The pine tree is not going to be an oak tree. It's always going to be a pine tree, but certain things about it, certain more superficial or outer things appear to change, but the core of that tree remains essentially the same. So from my perspective, there's certain things that change, that come and go, and then there's certain very core things that don't change at all.
Yeah.
You know, that at different points in life, with maturation, certain things all of a sudden become manifest, but they've always been there to some degree or another. So that's just my perception of it.
Well, one thing you were saying is it's very important to recognize our nature.
Yeah.
And you know, when we were together, you had me close my eyes and go back to when I was a child. So this seems like a very important thing to really recognize our nature. You have another one I'd like to hear more about, that were plugs or outlets.
Yeah. You know, I think the purpose of, or the value of recognizing one's nature is once you recognize what your design is, you know, the kind of tree, if you will, that you are. What goes hand in hand with that, from my experience, is acceptance. Once I realize who I am, not who the person is that I thought I should be or the rest of the world thought I should be, but exactly who I am. And I think we only get that through years of living and just recognizing we're still the same person that always was.
Yeah.
Once that happens, if we're very fortunate, we gradually become more and more unconditionally accepting with who we are. And the beauty of that is, when we accept it as it is, what used to be a problem sometimes dissolves instantaneously.
Yeah.
What we used to think was wrong with us or needed fixing or needed this or that, all of a sudden, those things may dissolve with the acceptance. And that's why I say, do we change, do we actually change, or do we just become more accepting of who we've always been? For me, I worked for years like everyone else, working on myself to be more present, to be this, to be that. And then I had a moment of grace when I felt that unconditional acceptance for the first time. It brought me to tears. And something has shifted since then. And one of the things that shifted is that yearning to be more is not there anymore. Now it's happening on its own.
Yeah.
We say the only constant is change. We're always maturing and so on. But I don't have that old feeling of lack. I don't have that feeling that I had as a child of not being smart.